All right, what is going on today, guys? So, in today's video, I got to chat with Janssen. He's a guy I used to work with, and I already do a pretty decent introduction in this video that I chatted with him in. So, all I'm going to ask right now is if you enjoy this type of content, then please refer to a friend that maybe is going through some struggles, has been through some struggles, or just someone who's looking to carve their life into a better direction. That's all I ask, because that really is the main point of doing all of this. And I think that you guys will get to see this in this conversation because it gets pretty intense, but I think there's a lot of meaning behind what we talk about. So that's your little trigger warning. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did, because I was really thankful for this one. Bang, we are recording. What is going on? So today I'm sitting here, I'm chilling out with Janssen, and we're gonna have a little conversation. Before I jump into it, welcome to this show. Welcome to the Mark D. Henny podcast. If you're listening to this on the podcast version, welcome to the YouTube channel if you're watching the video. But if you haven't heard this kind of stuff before, then what you can expect to hear is just open and raw, authentic conversations about different struggles or adversities or different goals we may have. And if you have heard this kind of stuff before, then thank you so much for following along on this journey and just supporting the notion that no matter what someone is going through, they're not alone. And that's kind of the point of doing all this. If you enjoy this kind of stuff, then feel free to follow along on this journey. You can subscribe on YouTube, or you can follow the podcast, whatever you prefer. But before I talk too much in this introduction, Janssen, why don't you kind of introduce yourself, tell people like how we met, tell people where they can find you on social media and what you've been up to recently.
Yeah, of course. So thanks, Mark. Me and Mark have not known each other for long, but we used to be former, colleagues working under Steve Nash. Of course, we were both under management at one point. Met through there, bonded through there as well. So in terms of social media, though, you can feel free to find me on my first name. It's JANSSEN .F is my main account. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions or feedback from our podcast that I'm doing with Mark today. So yeah, anything else? I mean, the reason why I guess we're chatting with Mark today, we reached out to him recently in regards to mental health. Mental health is, I would say I'm a shy advocate towards the topic, but being confident to reach out to Mark and sharing my experiences and what I know, I would love for all of you guys to really see or have some insight from what we're going to be speaking of today. So yeah.
Beautiful, man. Yeah, I'm excited for this as well because, this is something that it kind of struck me. Like, I was like, wow, it's powerful that you reached out to me. It's classic because I talk about this kind of thing all the time, but it's one of those things where it's like, I never knew that you'd suffered with anything like this. And you said like, it's been about like 7 years now that you've kind of been struggling with it. Is this like the first time that you ever like reached out to like one of your friends or like kind of just like opened up like this?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I've shared it with people. Of course, in the first few years, it was not easy. Especially family was probably the most difficult one. Of course, I did eventually share it to my friends. So, I mean, I'll be honest, at this point in my life, I wouldn't say have adapted to it, so to speak, but I'm not necessarily shy or I fear of sharing what I've gone through. With what I've gone through in the past 7-ish years. So, I mean, it's not something I've always identified it as something that it shouldn't be something that defeats me. That it's just a moment in my life that I'm going through or have gone through. And I mean, to be fair, the mental health illness that I've gone through and going through is not forever, right? It's not something I identify myself as. So I think that's really important at most, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, no, honestly, sorry, I'm just reaching
Mhm.
down to grab the pen I just dropped. But no, honestly, I
No
think
worries.
that's like one of the most important things to realize, like with anything in life, is like everything is temporary, no matter
Mhm.
like if you're talking about like struggles or friendships, relationships, like jobs, positions that you're
Mhm.
in life, whatever it is, like everything is temporary. Like what kind of
Mhm.
shifted from when you were, because you talk about like how you were like kind of a shy advocate and now you're actually like wanting to speak publicly about this and kind of, help give some insight to someone else who might be struggling silently. Like what kind of
Mhm.
shifted in your mindset there?
Well, okay, I guess we're gonna talk about history now, hey?
Yeah,
So,
we'll jump right into
um,
it.
yeah, yeah, no worries, no worries, no. I mean, this was something, being 22 now, this was something I kind of was going through an experience in my life, when I was about, I would say 13, 14. Yeah, as early as 13, if I can remember. Of course, in the beginning, I was in denial. I thought it was just pure emotion. Um, but of course, there was a sense of consistency of my emotions that kind of course, negligence, right? Being young, being 13 is like, oh yeah, it's just maybe it's hormonal. Like, I don't know, like, it's just like I'm just going through a phase, like just going through all this like hard shit. So obviously I didn't really think much of it, but of course when things kind of become more serious, I guess, like in terms of, I guess, if being very open now, like become those moments of being suicidal, um that it's just like, oh shit, okay, so something's going on. I think what made it more alarming in terms of how I became more aware was my family's responses and reactions towards my, I guess, emotions. And I'll be honest, as being a human being, and we all have, at most we have parents. It's not easy for their child to see and go through those things, right? So I think it was more alarming for me to understand. I'm like, okay, I need to understand what I'm going through, why I react to certain things. Um, so yeah, like going through those steps in my early years was not easy. Of course, it was very hard, mostly just from denial, as normal as it is. I think one of the biggest things for a lot of people that are going through some mental health illness, I guess you could say, is denial. It's just, it's, you don't want to believe that this is something that's happening to you, right? So obviously for me, it was not easy. As a guy as well, right? Like guys have this, have a sense of ego, have a sense of pride, and it's just like, yeah, we're like, at moments I was that kid that was like, oh yeah, I'm tough shit, like
Yeah.
so you don't want to show, we don't want to showcase that soft side. So um at most it was like one of those things. It's not a strong trait. It was more of a weakness that I was not confident of sharing. So I was obviously shy, right? And I would say being more confident, that I wouldn't say that I'm more of a shy advocate from what we're talking about. um I guess it's just confidence. It's just like taking ownership. I think is understanding that it's, the more I was going through denial, the more I was rejecting what I was going through. So, and that means a lot to people, because identification and understanding who you are is really key. And that's my point of view. It's just like really understanding who you are, how you feel, why you do certain things, why you choose certain things, and your perception to life is really key. And really homing into that is super important, because if you're denying something like weakness, um, you're not gonna get stronger, right? And we all know that, right? Like, to be successful, the more cliches is failure is key, really, to be successful, right? So to get to where we want to be, we've gone through failures or go through hardships to get where we want to be. So having to own that is a very hard obstacle, but it's a very important one. Would
Yeah.
you, right? Don't you? Yeah, like we all agree on that.
Yeah, 100%, man.
Hmm.
And I find like it's funny how, you talk about like being a man, being a guy, like it is kind of tough because I know with a lot of people that I have spoken with, even when you do reach out to certain people, they still tell you certain things like
Hmm.
like even sometimes they're trying to help you, but they tell you things like, you got to man up or suck it up or
Hmm.
those types of things. And it is viewed as a weakness, but to be 100% honest, like to reach out the way you did, like I usually reach out to other people in terms of like
Oh.
wanting to chat with them.
Hmm.
And I have had a couple people reach out to me, but just that kind of the way that you did it was like it stood out to me, and I was like, okay, yeah, we got to set this up ASAP. Just because the way that you spoke with me, I was like, that was really brave, man. Like that's not weakness. That is a strength. Like that is a strength, and it shows like bravery and courage to actually be like, look, like I'm in the darkness right now, where I was in the darkness, and I'm fighting tooth and nail to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that it is powerful. Like you noticed, like, or I noticed that you mentioned ownership of like what you're doing. And I know like when I was suffering a lot through my teenage years, I was like having a massive lack of ownership. Like I would kind of,
Hmm.
I always had this mentality of, why is this happening to me? Like why,
Hmm.
like if there's a God or whatever it is, like why would he give this to me? Why would he have done this to me?
I
Or
agree.
why
I
is the
agree.
universe serving this up for me? Like it just seems like it seemed so unfair.
Hmm.
And I think like a huge shift for me was I'm kind of just noticing this retrospectively, because you said it was taking ownership of like, look, like you are dealing with this, so what are you going to do about it? Like at this
Yeah.
point, what are you going to do about it? And
Exactly.
like I know you said as well, like it was tough to see your family's reactions, and that was like a wake up call. And I don't think I've
Hmm.
ever shared this story publicly at all, but I remember the first time that I decided, okay, look, like you need some medical intervention, like you need to see like a professional for something like this. And I
Hmm.
ended up trying to go to a doctor for it. I
Hmm.
remember like being diagnosed with, depression and anxiety. And I remember just kind of thinking afterwards, like once I was given that diagnosis and label, I was like, this is it. Like, this is who I am now. And I
Hmm.
called my mom as I was like kind of driving home, and
Hmm.
I was like sobbing, man. And I could hear the pain in her voice from hearing how much I was hurting. And
Hmm.
I felt ashamed. I felt like I let her down. Like I kind of felt like I was like, man, like this is like what her only son is like. So now like it kind of made me feel guilty. And I know like a lot of other people feel that way as well. I had someone, I was having a conversation with someone like earlier this week who reached out to me as well. And they were saying that they just felt guilty for how they felt. And it's
Hmm.
crazy because like these are human emotions, like these are human, like part of the human condition, like, and it's not like it just started happening with our generation. It's been happening for years and years. Like
Hmm.
this is how we've evolved. This is obviously something that humans go through. So like the notion that we feel guilty for, and I have as well, is like it seems obscure to me. Like I don't know if you've ever felt that way, or
Of
what you
course.
could think about that. Like
Yeah. No. Obviously, right? Like it's the sense. It's like it's going back to it's going back in the idea of being in denial, right? Feeling guilty. It's just like most, especially when you don't have that sense of confidence, especially when you're not willing to share. Especially when it comes in the early stages of what you're going through. It's some you don't want to you don't it's a there's a fine line that the way I see it, where you don't want to disappoint the people that are in your life, and as more importantly, you don't want to be that individual that shows like going back to weakness. It's just having to feel like you're that weak you're that weak strand of hair that needs to be pulled out kind of thing. So um that sense of guilt really definitely does, I can definitely take that to heart, because it's like, especially for me, like I can relate to you, like I have one other sister, she's a year younger, and feeling like the man of the house, or like being um the guy that has had this sense of personality that it's you feel guilty because you're like, oh, like shit, like I shouldn't be feeling this way. I feel guilty because I am feeling this way. It's essentially what it is. So, really homing it, like going back to like how guilty I felt that being family oriented like myself, that you don't want to be there's the level of my perception of being disappointment, which essentially is not true, right? I feel like have what you go through emotionally, and this is something I tell a lot of people, and what I really take to heart is emotions are valid, right? You when people have this idea of oh, it's not a big deal, like, oh, like, like if, for example, like my friend, if I have a friend that's like, oh, it's not a big deal, I don't really want to talk about it, or like, oh, like it may, oh, it sounds too like too bad, or no, it doesn't sound like a big deal kind of thing. I always tell them like, there's a reason why you feel this way, right? There's a reason why I feel this way, and it's all valid, right? We have our own perception, and people obviously just being by confidently saying that people will just never really understand what you're going through. But that's okay, really. It's just like we can't expect anyone to really understand what you're going through, right? Like obviously, like for you sharing that you experience your moments of depression, and for me as well, like it's a very different perceptions, right? Like we see it at different levels. But that's also one thing that I feel like society also needs to understand, is that there's no level of depression. So what I mean by that, like I can never forget this. It was like the first time, way before I started seeing therapists and counselors, um, was I went to see my family doctor first. Like my mom sent me to a family doctor, and he confidently, like, he was not a psychologist, or like he had no real background, right? Like he was a pediatrician. Like he was like, you have moderate suicidal depression. And I'm like, what the fuck does moderate mean, right? Like, what the
How
hell
is
does
that
that mean?
moderate? Yeah, how is that
Yeah,
moderate?
like it's like, why does there need to be a level to like that for me as a kid, like being at the, I think I was like 15 at that time. I was just like, I didn't know that there was. I mean, it didn't make sense to have a level,
Like
right?
level
It's
one,
just
you're in level one version. Like what does that
yeah,
even mean? Like,
yeah, it doesn't, I like, that's what I mean, like with like with society, especially, like perhaps there might be people that are not going through what we all go through, but that's okay. Like I said, it's people, we all perceive our own emotions and our own mental health our way. And I think for us, even for me especially, I to going back to ownership, you really just got to own that. Like, don't get me wrong, I've gone through like really bad moments of my mental health, and I'm just, after I kind of like settle down, like, and all of that, I just like, I'm like, okay, shit, like that was some hard shit, but that's what I went through. Like, like I don't have to identify it any less than what it needs to be. I don't need to make that judgment call, like, oh yeah, like I had a really rough time, and then I have to like act tough around it, right? Like, so it's definitely going back to like, you just can't feel guilty with what you feel. Just going back to answering your question, it's just really, you can't be guilty of what who you are, and you can't feel guilty for your emotions, right? Like, going back to what you were saying about like, oh, like why questioning is like, if there is a God, or like why is the universe putting this on to like me, or like why do I have to go through, I think that's also just, from my eyes, is just a level of comparison, right? I feel like we all have a place in the world, um or how I really think of it, I feel like I have a life that I have to live by, and I don't have to meet any certain expectations in the world. um but going back to comparing, it's we compare ourselves to external factors such as other people in our lives. Like my mom is like happy, like she's at her point in her life that she's happy, or my friends are just like high testosterone, egotistical human beings, and then they're like, yo, do they even have emotions? Um, that's just like it's I guess you could say a level of envy as well. It's just you envy for to those that you don't feel like you have. But in reality of it is that we all do have that level of potential and identification of who we really are and who we want to be. So coming from guilt, it's just um it's a very toxic mindset, being honest, right? It's so toxic. It's like you don't guilt leads guilt is a correlation to denial and rejection. So it's so toxic when you're like living by that. So I think it does take time though, right? Like that's something I realized more like in the past 2 years. Like that's definitely something I've understood better, which is very important, right?
Yeah,
So
man.
yeah.
I think
Mm-hmm.
well, there's a couple things I'd say to that. Like definitely looking at, external things like other people, family members,
Mm-hmm.
friends, other things like that. There's a pretty famous quote, I believe it's Teddy Roosevelt who said it. And I've said it a lot before, but he said comparison is a thief of joy. And like that's
Yes.
like the number one way to lose happiness or joy is to look at what other people have instead of just looking at the grass that you have. Like they say, like the grass is greener on the other side, or the grass is
Mm-hmm.
just greener where you water it, man. So like I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
those two sayings are related at all, but that's always something that I always think about when I find myself comparing myself to others or just comparing things in general. Is like comparison is the thief of joy. Like you're always
Mm-hmm.
kind of, you have a baseline level of how you feel about what you have, and then once you look at what someone else has, it's like, damn, well, I could have this or I could have that, but you don't ever actually compare like what you do have as opposed to what they don't. Like there's a lot of things that we are blessed to have that we don't ever think about or take account for. We're just
Mm-hmm.
looking at like what we want to have as opposed to what we already have. And then another thing I was going to say, I'm trying to remember now, I kind of got lost in my head there, but yeah, I just feel like comparing to other people is like a little bit, it's so easy to do, and like it's kind of pre-programmed into our head. It's like almost like a survival instinct of like when we used
Yeah.
to be cavemen type thing. Like you would
Yeah.
compare yourself to other people to make sure that you have the goods to survive, the type of things that
Mm-hmm.
you need to survive. So
Mm-hmm.
it is kind of something that you again can't feel guilty for, because like that is just how our brains are pre-programmed in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like evolution. And yeah, that's a tough one, man. Comparing yourself to other people, comparing yourself to, oh, actually, now I remember what I was going to say. And that kind of leads perfectly into it, is comparing yourself to the expectations that you have. And
Yes.
so a lot of the times, like I find we set a lot of expectations for ourselves, whether it's like the types of things we should have or the types of reactions we should have to situations. I find myself thinking all the time, like, oh, I reacted really poorly to this situation, but I have this expectation of myself where I would react all stoic and like kind of calm and relaxed and just be able to
Mm-hmm.
navigate perfectly around every situation. But then when the time comes to it, a lot of the times I fall short of that expectation. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like as, not just as like young men, but I feel like as humans, we always set, expectations for ourselves that are sometimes unrealistic. And then once we don't meet them, we just feel like bad about ourselves, or we feel that guilt that we've kind of been talking about. I feel like those type of expectations are like another form of comparison. Like we're comparing ourselves to what we expect we should be like, when really it's
Mm-hmm.
like, why don't we just take a look at what we are like and build from there? Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel like expectations are another, to not stick to that quote, but I feel like expectations are like another thief of joy that way.
Yeah. No, I definitely can talk about that because that's actually funny. I'm great that we are talking about that because the idea of expectations, um, is the way I'm gonna frame it and the way I think of it. Expectations is it's a toxic thing. It's so toxic, expect how it's a very simple equation. It's toxic equals disappointments, right?
Mhm.
So obviously the way we perceive a lot of things is negative always outweighs the good and the positive. So having expectations, like for example, like you getting rejected from a job, when it comes to anything in life or girls or whatever, expectation plays a key part, because into mental health especially, um, is that we expect to be there, like to a level of, like for example, like enlightenment or being happy, like, I think, like for me, to share a quote as well, like during quarantine I spent so much time on self-care and self-help, um just doing my research. And then I'm not so sure if you're familiar with Julian Blanc, but Julian said in his YouTube video of the manifesto to happiness was, the destination is not the journey is not to get to a destination. It's actually understanding that you're already there. Of course, I rephrased it, but what diving into that is that we don't have to expect getting somewhere. It's that we're actually there. We just perceive in a different way. I guess to really keep it, I think, like making it simple, like coming from his YouTube video, like um, happiness is not an emotion; it's a state. And for all of us, we have happiness in us. We just have, for people like me, um, it's not always the easiest thing to find in ourselves, even though we own it. Like we have, it's not, happiness is something we can't achieve because we already own it, right? It doesn't make sense that I have to find happiness. No, happiness is something we have. It's just we can't. There'll be times of feeling sad or depressed. It's because we're having difficulties finding it. It doesn't make sense to try to obtain something that you already own, right? Like there's no entitlement of owning happiness, right? Sorry, not owning happiness, obtaining happiness. We all own happiness. So in the expectation side, it's just people have this idea of like, oh, I expect to be successful, I expect to be rich, I expect to be smart, I expect to get A or B. Like it's the reality of it is that um to get there is very toxic. It's so toxic, that journey, and it leads to disappointments, and obviously disappointments, and you cannot avoid sometimes, right? So, and this is the way of life, but expecting something just leads to a toxic idea that you already don't have it. And in terms of mental health, expecting to be happy it's self-identification. You're self-identifying that you don't own happiness, right? Makes sense, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just like it's it's such a it's a very crucial thing to really grasp, is expecting that level. It's like love. Like I expect love. It's like no, we own love, right? We own love in our own
It's in
ways.
you. Yeah, it's in you.
Yes,
It's in your heart
right.
already.
So it's the like I said, just there's no journey to get to a destination. It's already understanding that you're already there. Um, so like that's why I talk you sharing about expectations is a big thing, especially for me. Like um for me, going, I guess, just if you don't mind sidetracking a bit, but um when it comes to my mental health and my depression, um love was always a huge one for me. um it, I take it to heart a lot, actually, that um having rejection, well, not in the same rejection per se, but heartbreaks and all this and that, is just like when people feel heartbroken, going through heartbreaks, it's just like you had this level of expectation that you should always feel loved, and when it gets taken away from you, then you don't own it anymore. But the way I've seen it especially more recently, is that um, going through a hard, like, for example, I'm gonna just be open to sharing. Like, I went through a breakup this year. Not the easiest breakup of the lifetime, but I actually understood right off the bat, within the few seconds of the breakup, that um, that I didn't need to expect that I lost love. It's that I already understood that I lost the person that was attached to love. I didn't lose love, right? So I think that was very crucial for me. Then just going back to that it relates that you cannot expect that you lost something that you always have, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's huge. And there's always things like yeah, I think that relates back to like kind of looking at the things, like looking at the things you have, looking at the things that you want or the things that you've lost. Like it's evident that you've already talked about many other sources of love. Like you've talked about your friends, your mother, your sister, and you could summarize that all as just say like your friends and family. And that kind of like, if you were to put like a numerical value, friends and family are two things. But if you were to break down individually how many people love you, like you'd see a long list, it sounds like, from what you're saying to me. And so like to just subtract one person that gave you that feeling of love and to be like, hey, I lost love, that's it. It's like, dude, you're not looking at the bigger picture. You're not looking at,
exactly.
I do the same thing. I'm not saying like you in specific. I'm just saying like as a blanket statement, like I'm just saying
Yeah.
like it's really easy to just feel like we lost love because we lost one person. But it's like, dude, there's so many people in the world that love you already, and there's so many people that you're going to meet that are going to love you as well. So and like it's so easy to find. Like I feel like right here, this is a connection built on like love. Like this is a connection. Like this is genuinely like we're going to be like honest and authentic with each other and vulnerable with each other. Like that, those are qualities of love, in my opinion. Like that's like, love isn't always like a romantic thing. Love is just actually opening your heart to someone and showing them like, hey man, like I'm a human as well, or like that kind of thing. I was gonna say as well, like relating back to, you were talking about how like love or like happiness is not a destination. I don't know if you've ever listened to Alan Watts. He was like an old philosopher. I'm gonna crack
No, I
open one of
haven't.
his books
Okay,
later.
sure.
Like it's a book I'm planning on reading, the next book. But he was a philosopher who kind of spoke a lot in terms of like Taoism and Buddhism, but in the Western world. He was a British guy who brought it to the Western world. And one of his famous stories or like quotes that he talks about is how, life, he says life is not a destination. But I relate it back to like happiness not being a destination. And one of the metaphors he uses is like, if the destination was the thing that was to be focused on, we are kind of negating all art. And art is like a form of love. Art is like a form of life. And he was relating it to like music and dance, those two things specifically. And so he said, if the destination was the beautiful part, the most important note in a song would be the last one. And the most beautiful song would be the shortest one, because that would be like the quickest way to get to the end. But when we watch like things like a dance, like a dancer on stage, if we watch like two people doing a dance, say like a salsa on stage, we don't care where they start on the stage, like their specific positioning. And we don't care about their last position either. Like what we think is beautiful as the audience, as the spectator, is all of the little intricate movements in between, all of the little things that they do in between. Like the destination is not the thing to be focused on. Like you said, like it's the journey, it's the middle, it's the stuff that happens between the beginning and the end that are the beautiful parts. And so like, that was kind of one thing I was like, damn, that really made me focus on that, because you're right, like happiness isn't a destination. And then like another thing I was thinking about with that as well, I'm trying to remember exactly how to kind of phrase this, but I feel like this is kind of something like a thought or a notion I've been kind of thinking of and trying to like form, I guess, properly in my head. But I feel like with happiness, and especially a lot with depression, Like people are like, oh, I'm out of depression now. Like I'm just not going to feel that way again. Or, hey, I have happiness now. And like, this is a permanent thing. Like I'll just always be happy again. Like that's
Yeah.
just kind of like, we always think of it as like, it's always one or the other. It's always like A or B kind of thing, like
Mm-hmm.
happiness or depression. And I feel like as humans, like you were saying, like this is something that you're always going to own in your heart. Like you're always going to be susceptible to feeling happiness. You're always going to be
Yes.
susceptible to feeling like down, depressed, whatever word you want to use to associate
Mm-hmm.
it with. But I feel like the key level of like what you would consider to be like mentally healthy, or whatever words you want to use for that, I feel like you could kind of measure it by like not how many times you feel sad, or not how many times you feel depressed, or not how many times you feel, happy. It's like to
Mm-hmm.
the degree of which those things impact you. It's like, it's okay. I had a conversation with someone last night, and I was like kind of stressed out and frustrated at work. And he was like, aren't you the guy that always talks about happiness? And I was thinking in my head, I kind of felt bad. I felt guilty. I was like, damn, man, maybe I shouldn't have talked about that shit, or whatever it was. And maybe I shouldn't have expressed my frustration in that way. And I was like, man, but like 15 minutes later, I was able to recuperate. And that's something to be proud of. Like, that's something to be like, okay, well, this is a sign that like, it's not impacting you as detrimentally as it used to.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain things you can kind of see. Like, I'm not going to look at myself and be like, oh, I never feel depressed anymore. Oh, I never feel frustrated or upset or burnt out or any of these negative emotions we talk about. But you
Mm-hmm.
can measure, say, like how much those things impact you, like how
Mm-hmm.
long they impact you for. And I feel like that's like a pretty powerful notion, because like you said, man, like you're never going to be able to erase these emotions from your heart, from your brain, whatever it is, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
happiness or the opposite. Like I feel like those things are what make us human. And I feel like if you were going to measure depression, like you were kind of talking about earlier, like that would be how you do it. It's not like the level of emotions you feel, but how those emotions impact you and how long they impact you, or to what
Mm-hmm.
degree they impact you. Like, do you have a rough night at work, and then that impacts you for like a week, which is
Mm-hmm.
fine. That's happened to me before as well. Or are you able
Mm-hmm.
to recover from it on your drive home, just listening to a song that really makes you happy, or thinking about a time where you were really happy, or just kind of thinking about the things that you have in your life that you're grateful for? Like, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like what you said, I believe you said like happiness is a mind state. Like, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's the way you could display it. That's the way you could kind of explain it, is like, it is a mind state. It's not an emotion, because
Mm-hmm.
when you're in that mind state, like, yeah, obviously things are going to happen that really fuck you up, man. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
just life. But it's like how
Yeah.
much they fuck you up and how long they fuck you up for.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like just to add on to that, like um for me, I guess one of the biggest things I was able to obtain this year was having that shift, like having this paradigm shift of understanding my emotions better. Like I won't being honest, like I wouldn't say I've cured myself from depression, so to speak. But I've understood, I'm more educated of myself, of why I feel XYZ. Um, so whatever things I'm sharing is just obviously not, it's not always going to work for everyone, but it's been working for me. Like for example, like this, like from just what you talk about, like oh having these things of like having a nice drive home or thinking of something happy. I'm very different, being honest with you, because when I go through like for this is something that my I guess one of my good friends really shared with me, that made me really think, with my emotions and just being in a bad spot, is that like going through a breakdown, it's just like you really just, it's going back to the ownership. You just really got to, I really have to own it. It's just like I'm going through some hard shit right now, and I shouldn't feel disappointed, guilty, or feel bad about myself for feeling like shit, because this is what I'm going through, but this is not who I am. Right? That's one thing that I
That's
have
huge,
to,
man. What you just said,
yeah,
that's huge. Sorry to cut you off,
yeah,
but keep
yeah,
going.
no worries. It's like that's such a key factor when people are going through a hard time, especially, is you not putting yourself in self identification that I'm depressed, or I feel like shit. Like, you know, it's just like, sorry, not no, I am shit. That's why I feel like shit. You know, like
Mhm.
for work example, like, oh, like we feel bad at work or stressed at work is because maybe you're not doing well at work, or you're not where you want to be. But that's not ideally the case. I have, like, for example, for work, like, um having stressors at work, it's just like, it's things that are going on has no, like at work has not really a huge correlation on how I feel. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I've perceived it that the stressors that I face at work is just giving me that has put me in a bad position. um doesn't make um it doesn't mean that it applies to everyone, because everyone will obviously perceive it in a different way. So it's that is a very big deal, because really just owning that, being responsible towards your emotions is key. Really, like, it's really, you got to be responsible for yourself. That, oh, I'm going through a breakdown, I'm having an anxiety attack, or I'm feeling suicidal. It may sound bad, but if you're the way I've gone through my experiences is having to push away, and really deny and feel guilty towards that sense of feeling. It's gonna put me in a worse spot, because, like, I'm just gonna be very vulnerable right now, um, openly. Like, I went through a moment in February this year, that I attempted suicide, unfortunately, and I at most I felt guilty, that I really was like, holy shit, like, I'm putting myself through this again. Like, that realization actually came when I was at the hospital, when I was sent to the hospital. This is like, holy shit, I felt guilty. But hours later, I realized to myself, like, what the fuck do I have to feel guilty about? You know, there's nothing I need to feel guilty. Like, there's no reason to, because feeling guilty is like saying, I feel guilty because I'm sad. And why do like, it's not a crime, you know? Emotions is not a crime. Like, sadness and depression is not a crime, right? Like, if it was a crime, god damn, I'd be life sentence right now, Mark. um
Both
but
of us would, man. I
yeah,
know there's a lot of other people that would be as well, man. But what you're saying is true. Yeah, I wish I could fucking hug you right now, hearing this. Like,
yeah.
I'm choked that we're across this computer screen, man.
it
But
it's yeah, I know, I feel that. But yeah, it's just, you I don't need, just going back to what I was going through in February. It's just, why the fuck do I need to feel guilty for feeling bad about, like, I don't, feeling guilty is essentially saying I feel bad about myself,
mhm.
and feeling bad about myself is not fair to me, and it's just as much as it's fair to everyone else, to my family,
Or the
right?
universe, that's like kind of,
Exactly.
put all these beautiful things in front of you. Obviously, like, it's tough to see these things when we feel that way, but it's like, man, like, there has been, like, I don't know, I can't speak to anybody else's life, but I know,
Hmm.
like, with myself, like, it's like, dude, there's been so many people that have tried to make me smile that I don't even think about. There's been so
Hmm.
many people that have helped me along the way, like different managers I've had at different jobs, different
Hmm.
coaches from sports, different teachers in school, different people I've
Hmm.
met that have, like, put in an honest effort to try and make my life easier and my life better. Like, and it's just like, kind of, yeah, man, it is tough, dude. It's brutal. It's brutal.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but man.
Yeah, no, no, no. Like, yeah, just adding on to what you're just saying, like, it's not easy. Um, it's it's not easy at all. It's hard to do, but it's not impossible, right? With anything. So having, like, external factors of people trying to make you happy, like friends, like coworkers, anyone really, family. Um, it's it's not, it's brutal, because, but the thing is, though, what I have to be more crucial about is, when all people are trying to make me happy, is, it puts me in a very weird mindset shift, where I'm like, wait a fucking second, why are these people making me happy? Does that mean I'm sad? Like, it's like it's a level that I feel like I'm getting from them. It's the impression I'm getting that people are feeling guilty, they feel bad for me, or that they're identifying me as a very sad, weak individual. Um, but the way I have to accept it is I accept that what they're doing is out of pure consideration, pure empathy. But it's for people though, when it comes to depression, um, it goes back to how I used to be. I'll be honest, like one of the biggest reasons of why I went through depression was feeling the level of isolation, feeling like obviously because like feeling like no one cared about me, no one loved me, like I felt like I didn't matter, right? Or feeling like a failure, etc., etc. But having to feel I'm but having to be that individual that had to be quiet and couldn't scream out into the universe asking for help. The way I see it now, it's that people, like, for example, if I feel like, if I for me, like, um I guess this is more something that's a bit more tangible to say, but for me, being a manager, and having my own team, and I'll be honest, like managers can have good days, and you can relate to that. Like we have bad days and good days. People sometimes think managers are very invincible. Like they're like they're such a high authority, and then they can do whatever the fuck they want. That's not the case. We're still human beings, and seeing that in my team's perspective, where I've gone through stressors or I genuinely felt bad and I couldn't control it, um, it makes me think to myself that, like, yeah, I'm actually going through shit, but it's not. I guess it's in a way where the way I see it, for them trying to help me, it's just it's not it's not really who I am, because it's like they're doing that because they realize, like, oh shit, Janssen's going through something, and this is not like him. That puts me more of how I can relate. They're like, okay, then they usually identifies me as a happy go-getter, cheerful, positive person. And for me, just going through now and then, it kind of gives me hope, I guess you could say. It gives me a level of hope now, because back then I was just like, oh fuck, like fuck your help. I don't need your help. Like I'm a man, I can take this shit. Um, just like just but now it's just I've really showcased vulnerability, that I can accept help, and that's important for a lot of people, right? Like getting help is so important to understand it. It's okay to reject help sometimes, but you should be open to it is more important. So yeah, like I realize it more that I can that this identity is really crucial. Identifying that I'm not a depressed person, and that these people externally that are doing things for me is because they realize this is not who I am. And that's a friendly reminder to myself as an individual. Um, but that's what a lot of people sometimes, like, especially for people that are struggling out there, like mental health is is a very difficult topic for a lot of people. And but the way I guess, like, I know, like you, Mark, you said, um when you shared to me, when you met when you replied, that you told me I'm brave, it's courageous. um I get it from your point of view. Don't get me wrong, I definitely get it, because yeah, it's not easy for a lot of people to be open. But the way I saw it when you said I was brave, I'll be honest, I didn't really agree, mostly because I owned it. I was just like, I'm telling you right now that I've gone through some hardship. I want to do this video. I want to talk about it. Um, but I wouldn't consider that I'm brave or courageous. I'm just a human being that has gone through some shit, but this is not who I am. And like, I've made through a lot of hard moments. But I wouldn't say I'm brave. It's just like I've just become confident that what I've gone through is not who I am, and that's really important.
Dude, if
So
that was written down, I'd fucking highlight that point right there. What I've
yeah,
gone through is not who I am.
yeah,
I always, sorry, I cut you off again. It's a
yeah. It's
bad
okay. It's
habit I
okay.
got, but I always try and remind myself whenever I feel like garbage, whenever I'm feeling like that, or I try and tell people this as well, is like, dude, you are not depressed. You're experiencing depression. That
Hmm.
doesn't make you who you are, right? Like, I'm not a guy who's depressed. I'm a
Hmm.
guy who's experiencing that currently. Like, that's
Hmm.
part of, if you were to look at like an entire spectrum of emotions, that's like one section of like where you can feel. Like, that's currently where you're at. But that has nothing
Hmm.
to do with like defining who you are. It's just
Hmm.
what you're currently experiencing. The
Hmm.
same way as like, you could look at a guy and say like, oh, that person's really rich, and maybe they have $1 million in the bank account, but then next year they could lose it all because they've invested in it all in like a stock that's plummeted because of something that happened, like say like COVID. Like, is that
Hmm.
guy still rich when he's got negative balance in his bank account? No, like,
Hmm.
it has nothing to do with where you're at the moment. Or I mean, it has nothing to do with who you are. It's just where you're at the moment, right? Like, you could
Hmm.
say, oh, that guy's rich, but then the next year he's filing for bankruptcy. Is that still a rich man? Is that still a rich person? Like,
Hmm.
it's just kind of something where they're at right now.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's huge, man. In terms
Yeah.
of like, someone who's listening to this, like if they're listening or watching this, like, what would be like an actionable item? Like, what would be something that they could act on? Like, for yourself, like I've kind of spoken a lot. I've got hundreds of videos on YouTube, over 100 videos on YouTube. You can go and
Hmm.
watch my personal opinions, but I want to hear from you. Like coming from where you were in February, where you're talking about you're in this really, really dark area, and it sounds like you've kind of made some improvements in how you're feeling right now. Like, it definitely sounds like it in terms of wanting to speak about it, but also just kind of the way
Hmm.
you're speaking about it in a past tense kind of gives
Hmm.
me a notion that you're feeling better. But I just wanted to ask you, like, what are some of the behaviors you've started, or what are some of the mindsets that you've adopted? Like, kind of like, where have you seen that mind shift? Is it like something that you're doing on a daily basis? Is it like, kind of give me some insight, like, if someone's listening
Yeah.
to this and they're feeling similarly, like, what are some ways they can start to like improve how they're feeling?
Yeah. And this is something I've shared with people too, of is self-reflection. So I guess to make it more like more better and easier understanding for people out there, um, I'm gonna share what I went through in February. So when I was sent to the hospital, I was in the hospital for the entire weekend. Not that I hated it, but the last morning I was in the hospital that weekend. I went through a very, I guess, crucial moment that I self-reflected. I reflected to myself that like I made it through a shady ass weekend being at the hospital because I tried to end my life, unfortunately. But I'm like, why the fuck am I still here? I guess I didn't achieve what I really wanted. Um, but I wanted something out of emotions. So in terms of what I could share with people out there, um, is really understanding your emotions. And the thing is, what I struggled with for years and years and years, going through multiple counselors and therapy, is that I had to be in a secluded, quiet room, sharing my emotions and getting them to understand. And people always tell me like, yeah, it happens. Like you go through a lot of counselors or therapy. You just have to find the right one. That's not necessarily the case, right? The person that you speak to, this therapist, this psychologist, this counselor, is not that dependent variable that's gonna like cure your depression. It's you, and that goes back to how why like I just taking ownership is a huge factor, but you can't take ownership if you don't understand how you're feeling. So what I do, if I go through some rough shit, even happy shit, if I'm being honest. Like if I'm going through like happy moments, um, I self-reflect. It, you just gotta really sit yourself down and understand um, why you felt a certain thing. And the way I do it, people might think like I'm crazy, but going it to self-reflect, I ask myself questions like, why do I feel this way? Did I need to feel this way? Or how did um, I responded and reacted this way, but did I, was there another way to react or respond to it? So going through a hard moment, feeling depressed, that's really key to really self-reflect. um, Myself is just really asking really basic questions of why am I depressed? Or like, why am I feeling depressed? Why am I experiencing this? Um, did I need to experience this? Did I need to react through this experience? I mean, is really important. And really understanding how you feel kind of broadens your range in the spectrum of your mental health, because it really makes you realize more where you are uh, um, in your own life. Um, so when I was back in that hospital, um, and really I had a self-reflection moment that um, I didn't need to do what I needed to do. I didn't I don't know why I wanted it, to be honest, at that given moment. And um, did I need to react a certain way through this experience? And the the most typically in terms of that, it's always a no. It's like, yeah, no, I didn't need to feel this way. I didn't need to react this way during this experience. Um, so it's understanding that no, you did not need to feel this way. You did not need to experience through that moment is really important, because that just comes from the self-reflection part. And um, self-reflection is really important because we act upon impulses, right? When it comes to being depressed, it's just like, oh, when people have this idea of triggering things, like when it comes to anxiety, like people are like triggering factors, like, oh, I'm like worried or scared of something, right? But really, I self-reflecting. Do I really need to be scared? Do I really need to be worried? Like, I'm gonna share this much. Like, um, I had a level of anxiety with my self confidence and my self esteem, and my level of insecurity um, was huge. So, and that was a really huge buildup of my anxiety. So realizing and having reflection, like, do I really need to be insecure of myself to feel like I need to fit in? Do I need to react this way? And by react in terms of my level of anxiety is, do I need to react by shying myself away, by hiding myself from or exposing myself out there, you know? So self-reflection is very important, but it's such a complex thing to do in our subconscious mind. It's so complex because it's not something we naturally do, right? It's not something like emotions. When we go for a lot of people who have high EQs or low EQs, when they react out of their emotions, it's very impulsive, and we never really understand why we act through things, especially anger. Anger is one of them, right? It's just like yeah, right? Like anger is it's a very huge emotion. It's a very powerful emotion because, um, but really homing into that and really reflecting, man, why the fuck did I need to be angry? Or like, do you need to always be angry at certain things, right? Um, you just really self-reflection is really key. Just
Yeah.
being, yeah.
Sorry. I was
No,
just
no,
gonna
no. Go
say,
ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, like, I don't think the way that you're talking about self-reflection is crazy or weird at all, considering that, like, the majority of my self-reflection is talking to myself in a video camera and just watching it. Like that is a lot of the time how I do it, right? Like I do keep a journal. I try my best to keep a journal. That's something that I've been doing a lot recently in the last couple of years. But like usually when I do have like a thought or an idea, I'm not really like 100% how to like wrap my head around or form like the idea properly. I'll usually end up writing down a couple sentences and just like turning on my phone camera in selfie mode. Like that's how this whole thing started for me, was just like trying to listen to myself speak about it and then watching that after and being like, okay, that's weird that I said this, this, and this, because I don't actually agree with that. Or there'd be a lot of different things. And I feel like as well, like in terms of, you said like when you were in the hospital, you said you didn't even know what led you to do these things to yourself. And I feel like a lot of the time I can still remember this. Like I remember actually saying this to one of my exes. I remember saying something along the lines of, no, I just at this point, like I can't remember a time feeling happy. I just feel so bad right now. And I would do anything for this to stop at this point. And just not seeing the hope of it getting better was leading me down like a similar path what you're talking about, man. And I feel like when you are in those like kind of, I always relate it to like dark fog, or like if you have like dark clouds surrounding your head, like you can't see the future, you can't see the hope, or you can't see the light, you can't see a future where it's possible to be happy, and you can't even see the past where you might have been happy before. The only thing you can see and focus on is this cloud that just goes around your head, and it's just dark evil energy. Like I don't know how else to explain it, but that's kind of the way I look at it. And at that point, to speak to what you're saying, like when you can't see a future or you can't see a good past, it puts you into an impulsive mood. It puts you into like, you know, if you can't see the gratification of hard work right now, or, you know, focus or whatever, like it is that someone may need to feel better. Like if you can't see the reward of continuing going, all you see is the right now. And that's what puts people in that impulsive kind of, you know, mind state or react. Like I know one of the managers that we used to have, he used to talk about, you know, being in a reactive state. Like if you're going to be reactive to everything around you, or if you're going to act with the intentions. Like he would talk about being in an intentional state or a reactive state. And I think that that's one of the things that puts people in, you know, a quote unquote reactive state, is not being able to, you know, see that there's hope, see that there's a light at the end of it, or just be able to, you know, live with the intentions to get there. You're just kind of stuck in that day. And it's just like, how do I survive this day at this point? And then that's where you're in like kind of like an impulsive state, right?
Yeah, no, like going back to that, like the whole reactive and intentive, it's just like how I've also shared with people. But what I tell myself most importantly is don't react, but respond. Same process, same ideal. Just out of reaction, of course, feeling like you are in a position where it's out of the norm, but yet again it is in the norm, but out of the norm because you feel like, oh crap, like there's no hope, I don't know how to get it. Or people sometimes like, oh, they don't know how to get out of it. But responding, but having that response without any emotional attachment, by responding into feeling like crap, it's just, by what I mean by that is really understanding like the self-reflection. Self-reflection is a part of responding. Is the way I've percepted response in terms of feeling down and all of this is acceptance, ownership, of course, and just the self-reflection that I take. So that's how I respond to it. Like you shared about a journal, I actually did a journal too. Like that was, I obviously self-reflection is not something we all do. It's not something that's normal, right? That we just
And it's
normally
hard to
don't think
do,
of.
man. It's really
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah. So like that was something I did after February, was really just every time I felt bad, especially, I would write it all down in the moment of, like, if I felt like shit, if I felt like absolute crap, I would ask questions to myself. I wouldn't, I wouldn't like in the journal, I wouldn't be like, oh, I feel like crap because XYZ. It's like, why did I feel like crap? Did I need to feel like crap? All that. Yeah, I kept the self-reflection journal. I still do. But at the end of the day, I'd rip it out the page and then throw it away because it's all history and it's all, I guess, irrelevant in my eyes. That's another key thing for a lot of people if they want to do that. It's healthy to, I think it's healthy to really understand yourself. So, but yeah, like it's very imperative that people really understand the reaction is a source of emotions, and really understanding what that is for people. And obviously, everyone feels a certain way differently than everyone else, right? Emotions are valid. The way that people think, people feeling depressed, people feeling like angry all the time, it's valid in their eyes. And for us as external people, as like that have gone through um like personal moments of like feeling depressed or feeling anxiety, is that we will never still understand what people go through. We will never really achieve um, what depression really means, because depression is not a term that um, has a definition to the way I see it. It is a negative connotation, but people perceive it in a different way. But and that's really important to be healthy. And a healthy mindset is just really understanding your feelings, really understand why you do certain things. Is very key. Um, don't not acting out of impulse, or if you do act out of impulse, understand why and really accept it. Right, a lot of things are inevitable, so um, it's really important to really understand it, right? So
Yeah, man, 100%. Well, I know that you've got a couple things to jump into today as well. I know that you're a busy guy, and I've already taken up like a good hour and a half of your time.
no worries more.
I'm gonna do a little bit of meal prep and go grocery shopping pretty soon. But that being said, there was a couple things that I wanted to say here. First off, I'm glad that we got to meet, man. I'm really, really thankful that we got to meet. Second thing, whether you and I are going to agree on this or not, I'm going to say it one more time. Dude, super brave of you in my eyes to reach out to me the way that you did. It's super brave, and it shows courage in my eyes. The fact that we're chatting and having this conversation that will be publicly seen, like I think that that's something that I'm going to say most people wouldn't be comfortable with. I view that in the lens of courage. I view that in the lens of bravery. I view that in the lens of strength. And I think that you've shown today that you're extremely wise beyond your years, man. Like I'm blown away by this conversation, man. It's really uplifted me, to be honest, even though a lot of the topics were what some people call like kind of like maybe a negative thing to speak about. But in my eyes, like this has uplifted me. Third of all, I want to say, again, obviously, thank you for sharing what you shared with me today. I'm going to shoot you my number right after this. I'm going to grab my phone and shoot you my number. I'm going to say, like, if you're ever feeling like that again, man, and I'm not just saying this, like, publicly, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I want you to call me. I want to be able to talk to you. And I expect that, honestly, I do feel like you would do the same for me at this point.
Obviously.
Like, I feel that connection now at this point. But, yeah, man, I'm really thankful for this conversation. I'm really thankful that I got to meet you, man. And I know this is not going to be the last conversation that we have in terms of teams. I know we're probably going to connect a lot more in the future. I feel like this has really created a cool bond between us. But yeah, man,
Yeah. Do you
I
mind if
find
I share? Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was about to give you the mic anyways. I was about to say
Oh
like
yeah.
I don't always do my own outros. I always like kind of like to pass it off, and so I'm gonna leave it up to you to kind of do the last little spiel of this thing. You can do a
Yeah.
shout out of where people can find you if you like. You can kind of share anything you like, but the one requirement I have is you have to leave some sort of a positive message for anybody
Yeah.
that has sat
Obviously.
through this and listened to it. But yeah, man,
Yeah.
honestly, thank you so much for this. And I'm gonna shoot you my number right after this, so you have my direct phone line, or you might
I
already
appreciate
have
that.
it. But
I don't.
okay, yeah, then
Yeah. Yeah. No worries, no
I'll
more.
shoot you
Um.
my number so you can message me. But yeah, dude, the mic's all yours.
Yeah. I mean, I have a couple of things I would like to share for the people that are watching this. Um. I guess to really break down and summarize the discussion that me and Marcus shared today, um, is that um, what I guess the main topic of us having to talk about the hardships of depression and other hardships of mental health. Um, I wouldn't say that we are cured because it's not a disease. It's not. It's not an illness. I know I shared illness just to kind of make it a bit easier for a lot of people because that's how they perceive it. But at the bottom road, it's not an illness. It's not something you need to cure. It's something that I'm going to share that you got to just figure out. Just that level of acceptance, ownership, responsibility. You just really got to understand that. And the way I've really grasped a lot of things is really accepting it is really huge. Um, but really, like really shifting your mindset in terms of like accepting it in a certain level, like accepting a certain level of why you feel this way. Um, so kind of going back as you probably maybe may all have heard it before, is that it's okay to feel what you feel. It truly is, and there's nothing wrong with what you feel. Like I said, it's not a crime to feel, have emotions. You have every right as a human being to feel what you feel, and don't let anyone, or don't, especially don't let society try to question or give you doubts, because there's no reason to. And you also, as another message I have to share with people, is you got to understand that not you got to understand that it's okay that people don't understand you. And that's really important because that should give you an open eyes to understanding that if people are not able to understand you, that you got to understand yourself. And that's an act of self-love and self-care. That's essentially what it is.
That's
So
huge.
mhm, yeah, it's very it's just important. And I know at this age, being 22, kind of I wouldn't say outgrown it, but I would definitely say I've understood it. Um, for some of you guys, if you guys, because I'll be honest, I have friends as well that have been able to open up and shared with me their own hardships. That people are more than welcome to be open. There's nothing wrong with opening up. Feel free to reach out to Mark. Um, Feel free to even open up to me. My social media is again Janssen, so JANSSEN .f. Feel free to. Very judgment free, obviously. Um, but yeah, don't don't be discouraged of who you are, because no one has told you who you were meant to be. No one uh no one when you were born was you weren't told that you had to be there. You didn't No one told you to be depressed. No one told you to be upset or happy or whatever. It's We own it, and you just gotta accept it. So I'll be honest, this discussion with Mark has really enlightened me more in terms of um sorry being really understanding of confidence. Like, obviously, I've watched and been watching Mark's videos, listening to people's ideas. Obviously, it's all different, and that's that's obviously the case. People are all different, but having to share what I've shared and experienced and my level of knowledge in terms of myself really was really enlightening, because hopefully for people out there that are watching, um, they they can have that level of confidence, and having that level of confidence will kind of broaden your range of your ideals and ideologies of who you are and how you feel. So this has really been beneficial for me. And thanks, Mark, for your time today.
No,
And
thank you.
yeah, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to really share and be open with this topic. Because obviously at one point it was hard for me to share, but now being confident, it's been it's been great. So thanks again.
I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to this are going to be really thankful that, you were, like I said, brave enough to have this conversation, open enough to have this conversation, vulnerable to open up like this, because I know for a fact, bro, like you and I, like experiencing the things that we've experienced, though they are different in terms of, levels or spectrums or time frames or whatever it is, like we all live our own experiences, but we're not alone the way that we feel, man. Like there's so many other people that I've met, and there's so many other people that I've yet to meet, or you've met yet to meet, that feel
Correct.
the exact same way, or are going to feel the same way in the future. And I feel in my heart, I feel like if they're able to hear these things and think, man, like I'm not the only one, like maybe there is some hope, then if one person feels like that, then I feel like our job was done. I feel like this time that we've spent together was well worth it. Like this is the reason I do this. So dude, there's no reason to thank me. I'm thanking you right now, man. Like this was awesome. I'm so glad that we had this conversation. I know it's not going to be the last one like it.
Yeah, obviously.
All right, man. Well, that's a beautiful way to wrap it up. There's not much else I can say in terms of that. So as far as that goes, I'm going to go ahead and just say, unless there's anything else you want to share, I'm going to say peace out for now. Like this isn't the end, but this is the end for today.
Yeah, obviously I look forward to obviously more open discussions. I definitely think me and Mike will definitely collaborate more on these things with these podcasts too, because obviously what I shared today, being honest with you, was actually just a fraction of experiences, but this is a very I had to share because this is a very important one in my eyes, that a lot of people just kind of need to understand that you guys have a voice. You guys, people are there to listen. So for you guys that are listening and watching this, you can be the same. You can voice out your own experiences. You can voice out your own feelings and certain level of knowledge. So hopefully people can realize it that way too.
Yeah, not just that, but I'm sure there's like a million ways to dissect the same things that we've spoken about. Like, even though there's like hundreds of other events, like this conversation went by so fast. I'm sure we could sit for hours and hours and just keep dissecting the same thing. Like, there's so many lessons to be learned from every single situation in life, man.
Correct. Yeah, that's very true. Anyways, peace out, Mark.
That's it. Thank you so much, bro.
Yes.
Peace out. I'm gonna shut it off now. Peace. Right. Thank you so much. Later.
Take care, everyone.